So I just wanted to take a few minutes and tell my own personal account on how inclusion does play a significant role in social competence development in young children. I worked at a camp for children primarily with autism and other developmental disabilities for 5 years. And we also had children who did not have disabilities but were from low income homes, and we were able to find these kids through our organization and gladly take them as campers so we could create an inclusive type of camp environment. I began at camp as a junior counselor. I was a senior counselor, a group leader, and eventually by my last summer I was a head counselor, group leader, and assistant director. So I've pretty much seen every side of working with kids with disabilities and without disabilities in a camp setting. Um, the picture that you see on the screen are four of my campers one summer, and I'll let you take a few minutes just to guess. Those four campers, all very, very different. One of them completely nonverbal, severely autistic. He is unable to communicate even his most basic wants and needs verbally. He is able to sign a bit, but not a whole lot. And yeah, so we have one of those campers like that. Another one of those campers has speech and language delays, makes it almost impossible to understand what he's saying, but he can communicate and he's just very immature. We have one camper who is from a low income home and he is not labeled as having any type of disability but comes to my camp. And there's another camper there who also has not been labeled as having any type of disability. And he actually isn't from a low income home, but he has a brother with disability, so we were able to take him into my camp. Just want you to take a minute and look at this picture and think about which campers are the ones that I just described. Okay, so from this picture, it just looks like if I didn't tell you that this was a camp for children with special needs, you probably would have no idea that some of these campers do have disabilities. Um, I don't think it's important to address which child has what disability or lack of disability, but the main importance is look at these four boys. They are all different in age and disability, but they are all playing on top of each other in a playroom in a camp for children for disabilities and without disabilities. And these kids are able to learn from one another. The boy who can't speak verbally and really it's very tough to communicate with him, he's still involved in the pile up here. He's still playing with kids and he's still making friends. And if this child were to go to a camp setting or a school setting where he was only surrounded by kids with disabilities, do you think he'd be able to make friends and have social experiences like this? Because I don't think so. Um, this picture says it right here why inclusion is so important for social competence. Kids with disabilities need to be exposed to kids with disabilities and without disabilities in order to develop socially. We're all different, and if I were surrounded by the same group of people who look just like me, act just like me for my entire life, I wouldn't be able to grow socially. So how do we expect children to be with other children with disabilities and be able to learn and gain social competence? They're not going to. Children with disabilities need to be included in school settings and be placed in the least restrictive environment, which is hopefully a setting where they do have time with kids who are typically developing in order to have a sense of belonging. And they're able to have role models for acceptable social behavior, such as sharing and turn taking, even just knowing that during circle time, you need to sit in your seat. If you're a child with a disability in a classroom where kids are getting up and running around all during circle time, how are they supposed to know that's not what's allowed and that's not what's socially acceptable in the classroom? Kids with disabilities need to be included in order to just gain social interaction opportunities. Kids with disabilities who struggle with language and aren't able to communicate effectively just yet aren't going to learn these things from other students who are just like them. They need students who can speak, who can communicate, who are verbalizing and using their words in order to have peer role models. And at the same time, just as important of inclusion is for students with disabilities, it's the same for students without disabilities. When children don't have the experience of inclusion, and typically developing children aren't exposed to kids with disabilities, they'll never learn tolerance or respect. They won't learn differences. I know from my own experience as a child that the special ed class was always made fun of. And it disgusts me to think back to those days in elementary school where my entire class would sing rude and disrespectful songs, making fun of the special ed class just because we didn't know them. We had no experience with them at all. They were totally separate from us. And as we all know, fear of the unknown exists. So kids need to be exposed to one another in order to create social competence and gain skills like empathy and respect and tolerance.